My name is Elijah. I was a millionaire, a global LGBTQ+ leader, and the founder of support centers across the US. I was praised by celebrities, partnered with massive corporations, and invited to speak at conferences around the world. I had influence, power, purpose, or at least I thought I did. But then I died, not just metaphorically. I flatlined after a violent car crash on my way to another major LGBTQ+ summit. That moment, a near-death experience, ripped the veil off everything I believed. I left my body, and I met Jesus, the real Jesus, the one no one dared talk about in my circles. And he didn't comfort me. He confronted me. He showed me things that shook me to my core, the spiritual war behind the sexual revolution, a hidden agenda operating through politics, media, and even activism. I saw how my influence was being used by a spiritual elite to lead people away from truth, while calling it love. But what I thought was freedom was actually deception. And if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I never would have believed it. That's why I'm speaking out now. Because this isn't just my story, it's a warning. And maybe it's yours too. So before we begin, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now where you are? I want to see how far this message reaches, and if something inside you has been stirring, if you felt that this world is changing in ways that don't feel right. Subscribe to the channel, Truth from Beyond. I'm sharing these revelations because you need to hear them. This isn't just a video, it's a message, and what's coming next could change everything. And if you're starting to feel like something's off in this world, if you felt the awakening stirring inside you, subscribe now to this channel, Truth from Beyond. You won't want to miss the next videos. What I'm about to share isn't just a story, it's a revelation. And it might be your warning too. I grew up in the kind of house where silence screamed louder than words. My dad drank more than he prayed, and my mom cried more than she smiled. I remember lying in bed at night, listening to their arguments crashing through the walls like thunder. I was just a kid, but even then, I felt like I was holding my breath inside a war zone. I didn't have the words for it at the time, but looking back now, I was born into a spiritual war. And it wasn't just around me, it was inside me. After the divorce, it was like someone turned the lights off in my soul. I felt abandoned by both of them, even though I stayed with my mom. She tried her best, I think, but her best was buried beneath bills, anxiety, and unhealed wounds. I became invisible. I'd walk through the house like a ghost, tiptoeing around her mood swings, trying to make myself smaller so I wouldn't be a burden. That loneliness? It wasn't quiet, it screamed. And in the silence I started searching for love, for attention, for truth. I stumbled upon pornography when I was just 8. I wasn't even looking for it, just clicking around on an old desktop while home alone, and suddenly there it was. At first, I didn't even know what I was seeing, but something lit up inside me, and then twisted. It felt powerful, and then shameful, confusing, dark. That moment became a hidden addiction, a secret place I'd run to when the world felt too heavy, too fake, too cold. But every time I came back from it, I felt filthier, more lost. That's when the deception started, taking root in my mind about who I was and what I was worth. By middle school, I started noticing I was different from other boys. I tried to push the thoughts away, convince myself it was just a phase, but the feelings wouldn't leave, and I couldn't talk to anyone. Not in our church, not in our town. Where I was from, boys were tough, silent, and straight. Period. Anything else was weakness, or worse. I began to believe that something was broken in me, that I was cursed, that maybe I was being punished for something I didn't even understand. That twisted guilt, it became my shadow, and so I buried it. I buried it deep. I learned to smile in public, to be the good kid teachers praised and adults ignored. But inside I was screaming. I wasn't just fighting for identity, I was fighting for my soul. And even though I didn't know it then, I was already caught in a hidden agenda, one that would offer me comfort on the surface, but drag me deeper into confusion. That confusion led me to the next stage of my life, where the search for belonging would take me into communities that felt like family, but came with a price I couldn't see until it was too late. By the time I hit high school, I was living 2 lives. On the outside, I was this well-mannered, sharp student who laughed at the right jokes and stayed out of trouble, but inside, man, it was chaos. The pull I felt toward other boys wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual, and it wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a roar. I tried to pray it away, cry it away, starve it away. But nothing worked. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't just dealing with a personal issue. I was caught in a spiritual war, one designed to isolate, confuse, and ultimately destroy me from the inside out. Every day felt like walking on a tightrope with no net. I'd walk through the halls pretending to be something I wasn't, terrified that someone would see past the mask. I feared rejection, not just from classmates, but from my own family, my church, my God. I thought if anyone knew what I was really feeling, they'd disown me. I believed I was alone in this, that nobody could possibly understand. That kind of fear? It's paralyzing. And that's exactly where deception thrives, in silence and shame. Then came the internet. I found anonymous chat rooms where people talked openly, honestly, for the first time. It was like someone had opened a door to a world where I wasn't alone. I remember shaking the first time I messaged someone, just typing the words felt like I was betraying everything I'd ever been taught. But when someone replied with kindness, understanding, I cried. I had no idea how much I was starving for connection. And that's how the awakening began. Not the one I needed, but the one that felt good. College was where everything exploded. I got out of my small town, landed in a progressive city, and suddenly I wasn't hiding anymore. I came out to a few friends, then a few more. The relief was overwhelming. I finally felt free. I joined LGBTQ plus clubs on campus, made real friends. People clapped when I told my story. They hugged me, affirmed me, loved me, or so I thought. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, and that sense of belonging, it was intoxicating. But I couldn't shake this feeling deep down that I had traded one identity crisis for another. Looking back, I can see it clearly now. The community gave me a taste of connection, but it also came with chains. There were things you couldn't question, feelings you couldn't express, doubts you couldn't voice. And behind the smiles and slogans, there was an unspoken rule: stay loyal to the cause, or be cast out. What I thought was liberation was actually another kind of prison. But at the time, it felt like home. It felt like truth. And I threw myself in, unaware that my soul was still starving for something real, something eternal. That hunger would lead me to become a leader in this movement, and eventually the face of a deception I didn't yet recognize. I never intended to become a leader, it just happened. One speech at a campus rally turned into 3, then 5, then a keynote at a regional conference. People started quoting me, sharing my posts, inviting me to panels. I was young, passionate, articulate, and angry. Angry at the church, angry at my family, angry at the world for making me feel like I had to hide. That anger became fuel, and before I knew it, I was the guy others looked to for strength. But what they didn't know is that I was still bleeding inside. It wasn't long before I founded my first LGBTQ plus student alliance. We weren't just about support, we were about activism, change, visibility, justice. I helped open drop-in centers on campus, then in the city, then across state lines. We offered counseling, health services, even legal aid for youth who'd been rejected by their families. People called us heroes. But what I couldn't see back then was that the awakening I thought I was leading was still rooted in the wrong soil. It looked like truth, but deep down something felt off. Every time I gave a speech, I felt like I was climbing higher, but also drifting further. I'd say things on stage that sounded powerful, even holy, about self-love and freedom. But when I got back to my hotel room, it was just me and the silence. And the silence started asking questions. Why do you still feel empty? Why are you terrified of being alone? Why does the applause feel so hollow? I ignored it, of course. Numbed. Hit. Filled my schedule with events, flights, interviews. I told myself I was making a difference. I told myself I was saving lives. But deep down, I was still searching for truth, and terrified that I might not find it where I was looking. Soon, I was mentoring others, training the next wave of activists. We built a network of support centers in multiple cities, created national campaigns, partnered with schools. I was on podcasts, magazine covers, documentaries, and with every spotlight, my name grew. People called me inspiring, brave, a voice for the voiceless. I started believing it. I wore it like armor. But inside, I was exhausted, spiritually fragile, and haunted by dreams I couldn't explain. Visions of fire, of crowds screaming, of a voice whispering, "This isn't the truth." I shrugged it off, but it kept coming back. I didn't know it yet, but I was walking straight into a trap. One that looked like success, but was forged in deception. Because while I thought I was liberating people, I was unknowingly feeding into a hidden agenda, one much bigger than sexuality or politics, one that wanted to distort identity, divide hearts, and erase the image of God from an entire generation. And just when I thought I had it all figured out, came the fame, the wealth, and the illusion that I was untouchable. Money came in faster than I could count. Big brands wanted their logos on our events. Celebrities sent private messages of support. Corporations offered partnerships. I was flown out to conferences in London, Sao Paulo, Berlin. Private jets, luxury hotels, standing ovations. It felt like I was at the peak of something sacred. But deep down, I knew I wasn't building a movement. I was building an altar. To myself. And behind the glamour, and something darker was watching. Waiting. I told myself it was favor. That the universe, or fate, or even God was rewarding me for my authenticity. I bought a penthouse in LA, a cabin in the Rockies. I ate at $400 restaurants and shopped. With stylists. People envied my life, and I made sure they saw every highlight on social media. But in the quiet hours, when the parties died down and the champagne ran dry, I felt a coldness I couldn't shake. No matter how high I climbed, there was always a voice behind the curtain whispering, "This isn't the truth." The dreams got worse. They weren't just visions anymore, they felt like warnings. I saw fire falling from the sky. I saw leaders in suits laughing while signing documents soaked in blood. I saw children being led into darkness under rainbow-colored lights. I woke up sweating, trembling. Something inside me was breaking, but I didn't know how to stop. I was addicted, not just to the fame, but to the illusion. I didn't realize it yet, but I had become a puppet of a spiritual elite, one that rewards influence so long as you serve its purpose. At a world conference, I stood on a stage with government leaders, tech CEOs, and entertainers. The theme was global unity through identity. It sounded noble, but something about it chilled me. We weren't just talking about love or safety, we were talking about reshaping the very fabric of humanity. "We are the architects of the future," one speaker said. People cheered, but in that moment my stomach turned. I realized we weren't uniting people, we were conditioning them. And the foundation wasn't freedom, it was deception, dressed in gold. Yet I said nothing. I smiled. I posed for photos. I flew back to my mansion and ignored the unease clawing at my chest. I told myself I'd worked too hard to start questioning now. But that silence, that small rebellion against my own conscience, would soon crack open the path for something unexpected. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to crash, hard. And when I did, the veil would be torn. And I'd come face to face with Jesus in a way that would ruin my life and save my soul. It happened on a rainy night outside Atlanta. I was headed to another LGBTQ+ leadership summit. This time to announce a new global mentorship initiative backed by a Silicon Valley billionaire. My team had prepped every detail. I was reviewing my notes in the back seat, headphones in, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit, literally and spiritually. We never saw the semi-truck coming. It hit the passenger side at full speed, glass shattered. Metal bent like paper. The world spun, and then everything went black. But here's the part no one could explain. I didn't just pass out. I left my body. I watched the scene from above. I saw myself bleeding, crushed, lifeless. I heard the paramedics shouting. I saw one of them shaking his head, mouthing, "He's gone." And that's when the real encounter began. Suddenly, I was pulled through a tunnel, not one of light, but of weight. A heaviness I can't describe. And then I stood before a presence, radiant, terrifying, beautiful, and unmistakably Jesus. He didn't speak with his mouth. He spoke through everything. His eyes pierced me. Not with anger, but with sorrow, deep sorrow. He showed me my life, not as I had lived it, but as heaven saw it. I saw souls I'd influenced, not toward freedom, but toward confusion. I saw young people who had followed me, now lost in despair. I saw spiritual chains hanging over cities where I'd spoken. I tried to defend myself. I said, "But I was helping them." And Jesus said, "You pointed them to you, not to me." Then came the visions. I was shown a map of the world, only it pulsed with light. And darkness. I saw nations bound by fear, seduced by pleasure, manipulated by a hidden agenda. Jesus revealed to me how the elite use identity politics, media, and even technology to enslave minds, not through violence, but through seduction. I saw demons dancing in the shadows of pride parades and boardrooms alike. I saw pastors silenced by money, children led into confusion by screens, and behind it all, a single burning word, deception. And yet, he didn't condemn me. He offered me a choice. He said, "I gave you influence to lead people to me. Will you surrender it, even if it costs you everything?" I wept. not because I was afraid of losing fame or fortune, but because, for the first time, I felt truth, pure, undeniable, holy, and I knew if I ever woke up I couldn't go back. I had to leave it all behind. Because what I'd seen wasn't just a vision, it was a revelation, a divine warning. And when I opened my eyes in that hospital bed, I knew my real life was just beginning. The moment. I woke up in that hospital bed, everything felt different. Not just emotionally, physically, spiritually, atmospherically. I could feel something had been severed. My hands shook, not from trauma, but from the weight of what I'd seen. I knew I wasn't supposed to be alive. I should have died, but I didn't, because Jesus wasn't done with me. He gave me a second chance, not for comfort, but for confrontation. My life was no longer my own, and I knew everything had to change. My team flew in the next day, ready to reschedule the summit. I told them it was over, not just the event, the whole thing. I shut down every LGBTQ+ center I had founded, personally. Made the calls, sent the letters, and closed the accounts. People thought I was having a breakdown, but it wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. I stood in front of my board and said, I met Jesus, and I've been living a lie. You could have heard a pin drop. Then came the yelling, the threats, the accusations. But I didn't care. I had tasted truth. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. Within days, I released a public statement. It wasn't polished, it wasn't politically correct, but it was real. I wrote, I no longer identify with the LGBTQ+ movement. I have surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. I now believe in the eternal truth of his word, and I repent for the lives I misled. I choose obedience over applause, even if it costs me everything. And oh, it did. People I had loved, mentored, supported, cried with, turned on me instantly. Headlines smeared my name. Former allies labeled me a traitor, but none of it compared to the peace I felt in my soul. There were nights I cried hard. I lost deals, contracts, close friendships. Donors demanded their money back. My bank account was drained within weeks. Lawyers threatened lawsuits. I went from penthouses to couches, from limousines to buses. But I never once regretted my decision. Because with every step of obedience, I felt heaven smiling. I felt lighter, cleaner, free. I wasn't just repenting from a lifestyle. I was walking away from an entire system of deception that had seduced me with love but delivered bondage. This wasn't a rebranding. This was a rebirth. I didn't just change my mind. I received a revelation, one that burned away the lies I had built my identity on, one that exposed the spiritual war we are all living in, whether we admit it or not. And though the price was high, I had counted the cost, because Jesus didn't call me to be popular. He called me to be faithful. And now, my mission had changed. I wasn't here to build a movement anymore. I was here to speak a warning and to call others out of the fire I barely escaped. The storm came fast. The moment my statement went public, I was erased. Not slowly, overnight. My phone exploded with hate. People I had mentored, loved like family, traveled the world with, now called me a monster, a fraud, a danger. Major media outlets labeled me as a defector, a zealot, even a threat to democracy. Friends blocked me. Collaborators ghosted me. Security had to be hired at one point because of death threats. That was the price of choosing truth over applause in a world addicted to affirmation. Then came the financial collapse. Contracts were canceled without notice. Corporate sponsors cut all ties. I had to sell everything. Cars, property, watches, even my suits. I remember looking at my reflection while packing. No lights on, just the pale glow of an empty condo, and asking myself, is this really worth it? And then, like a whisper through the dark, yes, because what you lost isn't life. What you gained is... That voice, I knew it. It was Jesus, still walking with me, still reminding me that the awakening was worth the shaking. Even pastors distanced themselves. I thought the church would welcome me, but some were scared of the controversy. Others didn't believe I'd really changed. Some outright mocked me. One well-known progressive influencer posted, he traded love for legalism. How tragic. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't die like I did. They didn't meet him. They hadn't stood in that place where revelation peels back every illusion you've ever believed. If they had, they'd be running too. There were moments when I felt completely alone, sitting on park benches with my last few dollars, wondering how I'd eat, sleeping in borrowed basements. I questioned everything, but I never questioned him, because even in the wilderness, I could feel his presence. The same Jesus who pulled me out of death was now walking me through the desert. He hadn't promised ease, he promised eternity. And I'd rather suffer in obedience than prosper in deception. This world, with all its praise and platforms, was never the reward. That was the lie. The hidden agenda sells you fame but steals your soul. And I had almost handed mine over. Almost. But grace interrupted me. And now, stripped of everything, I was finally free to walk in what mattered. And as the noise faded, a new calling began to take shape. Not one built on influence, but on intercession. Not for followers, but for souls still trapped in the fire I had escaped. Today, my life looks nothing like it used to. No more red carpets, no more panels, no more spotlights. I live simply. Small apartment, borrowed car, enough to get by. I work in ministry now, not a megachurch, just a humble community of believers who know what it means to be rescued from darkness. I don't need a stage anymore. I have a Bible, a testimony and breath in my lungs. And that's enough. Because once you've died and met Jesus, you stop chasing what the world calls success. You chase obedience. You chase truth. Every chance I get, I share my story. Online, in churches, on street corners, in whispered conversations with people still caught in chains. I speak not to condemn, but to warn, to tell people that there's a war they can't see. A spiritual war waging for their soul, disguised as affirmation, as inclusion, as identity. But behind it all, a coordinated deception. A scheme to erase who God created us to be and replace it with a counterfeit. That's what I tell them. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. I speak often to those in the LGBTQ+ community, not with judgment, but with urgency. I know the pain, the rejection, the longing. I lived it. But I also know the trap, the illusion, the seduction that comes with freedom that leaves your soul starving. I tell them, you were made for more, not because I want to erase them, but because Jesus wants to restore them. And many have listened, quietly, secretly. Some have left the movement too. Others are still wrestling. But the awakening is spreading, and it's beautiful. People ask me if I miss the old life, the wealth, the travel, the power. And I tell them, no, not for a second. What I gained can't be measured in dollars. I gained peace, real peace, the kind that stays even when everything else falls. I gained purpose, not a platform, a mission, a fire in my bones to rescue those still lost in the fog. Because I remember what it felt like to be celebrated by the world and tormented in the dark. And I wouldn't trade the revelation I've been given for all the fame in the world. So now I live with my eyes fixed on eternity. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds me. And if I never speak on another stage, if I never trend again, I'm okay, because I already died. And when I came back, I found life. Not the life I wanted, but the life I was made for. And now, I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to shine light into dark places, to tell the truth no matter the cost. And maybe, just maybe, someone listening today is ready to open their eyes and come home. That's my story. But more than that, it's my rescue. I died and came back with a mission. Not to preach religion, not to chase fame, but to sound the alarm. There is a war happening right now. You may not see it, but you feel it. In your mind, in your home, in your relationships. The world is being reshaped by deception, and most people are sleepwalking straight into it. But here's the truth. You don't have to stay blind. You don't have to stay bound. The same Jesus who met me in the place between life and death is calling you too. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like something darker is moving beneath the surface of all these social and political changes? Have you had an experience, a moment, that shook your reality? Share it in the comments. Let's start a conversation that breaks chains. And if you made it this far, I know this message was for you. So don't scroll past, subscribe to Truth from Beyond, and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next, because this was just part 1. The next video will show you how what I saw lines up with prophecies that are unfolding right now. Click the video appearing on your screen. What you're about to hear will confirm what your spirit has already been sensing. I'm Elijah. Thank you for listening. Stay awake. Stay ready. Because the truth always finds those who are willing to see it.